Hello and welcome into the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I'm National Recruiting Analyst Cooper Petagna alongside 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Andrew Ivins. We got a special friend today on the show with us. How about Tom Loy, National Recruiting Analyst? Going to break down Battle New Orleans, right? He was in Louisiana over the weekend. Also going to fire in some crystal balls as well. Tom, how we doing, man? Welcome to the new format. We're just talking. It seems like you forgot your suntan lotion in New Orleans. Is that right?
That sun hit me pretty hard. Feeling pretty good though. A couple more hours out in that heat and that sun, man, it could have been a problem, but we're feeling real good today.
As Coach Orgeron once said, he calls him Ray Baker, right? Ray Baker 1-0 against Tom Loy. We'll keep count of that as it goes forward as we get through the circuit. But Tom, people want to know, man. They heard that you have some spring intel. We got some crystal balls to get to as well. So we'll kind of go down the line here and let's start one of the best players in the country and not bury the lead. The number 4 receiver, number 30 player overall, Jamie French. It seems like there's some Ohio State buzz there, huh?
Yeah, feeling really good about the crystal ball for Ohio State at this point. I want to fire that bad boy in. I'm liking the Buckeyes. Just being in New Orleans, being around him, watching him work again. Just such a special talent. Makes the tough catches look really easy. Fun to watch that kid work, man. But Florida State, Miami, Tennessee, Texas, all very much in play. I'm not saying this is a done deal, but I'm really liking the Buckeyes. We talked about this guy for, the last couple of weeks, going back to when I was in Vegas, and knowing I was going to be at this event, being around him once more, being around people that know him better than I do. I just wanted to kind of get a pulse, get a feel. And I just really think that if today was signing day, I think Brian Hartline, Ryan Day get it done. And I like the Buckeyes.
Drew, from a scouting standpoint, what do we have? 7 receivers in the top 32 last year?
Yeah,
it's pretty interesting, trying to figure this guy out. I thought he's a better athlete than he kind of showed on tape. You look at the testing, guy's pretty dynamic. Where would he fit, I guess, in terms of the tier of receiver if you had to compare him to some of those guys last year? And the guys, in case you forgot, some of the names at the top of the board, you think about Jeremiah Smith, Cameron Coleman, Ryan Williams, TJ Moore, and the list kind of goes on and on. Is he in that conversation, or is he more kind of geared kind of maybe closer to top 40-ish?
I think he's closer to top 40-ish, right? And I think maybe we saw a generational wave of wide receivers in that last cycle. And we've had this conversation behind the scenes. Okay, if you take some of these receivers and you were to place them in the 2024 cycle, where are they at? And I think with Jamie French, he's in that same kind of category with your Mike Matthews, with your Courtney Crutchfield. But we'll see. He's still got a senior season of play. It seems like every opportunity he gets to lace up the cleats and compete, and I say lace up the cleats because remember at the National Combine back in January, he was a guy that wasn't going to go through drills. They found him some cleats. I believe they were Adidas 3-stripe, and then he ended up being our alpha dog for the day. So what also stands out about Tom and that crystal ball for Ohio State, Coop, you keep bringing it up. Okay, with Nick Saban out in Tuscaloosa, who's the program that's taken advantage? And remember, Jamie French was committed to the Crimson Tide, right? It's hard to imagine him being back on the market if Nick Saban's not on Capitol Hill, right? Talking about NIL and the current landscape of college football. If he's still there in Tuscaloosa, is Jamie French available? That's just a question I posed to both of you guys.
I don't know. I felt like Florida, the state of Florida, was starting to get more of a grip back on its talent base within the Sunshine State. And it's not like Ohio State hasn't had success along with a handful of other programs. You think about Alabama, you think about Georgia. But with Nick Saban out of the picture, I think, there's a clearer path for guys like Jamie French. Another guy we'll talk about here in a second, Vernell Brown, right? You think about a lot of that talent in the Sunshine State. Jeremiah Smith, Brandon Ennis, you can go back. Obviously, Brian Hartline himself at the receiver position really kind of entrenched in that state. Tom, I just brought up Vernell Brown, a guy that has been a pretty big riser for us, the number 15 receiver in the country, top 170 prospect in the top 247 right now. I think you're pretty close firing in a crystal ball there, right, to Ohio State as well.
I am absolutely going to join Steve Wiltfong with that pick. I'm on the Buckeyes. I feel like Ohio State's going to get that one done. And tremendous performance this weekend from the kid. He was so good on both sides of the ball. When I was talking to him, I was like, I just had vibes of like Amon-Ra St. Brown, kind of watching him kind of come up the circuit and just watching how dominant he was. And Vernell kind of gave me those vibes. And again, not one that's done. I don't think this is a done deal by any stretch. Florida State, Miami, Florida, even Georgia, all in play. This is a guy who wants to take all of his official visits. But again, this is the current pulse. I think the Buckeyes have the edge right now. And I think, and I talked to him, I asked him flat out, like, is there a better duo in America when you're lining up alongside Jamie French? And he said, no, it's not even close. And I even asked him, was this night, like his first night, Saturday night at Battle New Orleans, was this like a random event? Like he said, no, like this is just what I do. It's what I do every single time I step on the football field. So if you can get both those guys, man, Ohio State already has it rolling, but add these two, this class is becoming really, really special.
Drew, are you surprised? Not so much if Vernell Brown ends up in Columbus. I was thinking about it today. I was going through their roster, looking at the receiver position. I don't think they've had a guy like this, just in terms of stature and maybe utility, since Curtis Samuel. This is not really the typical guy that they kind of recruit. I was kind of surprised, out of all of the options that you'd think Brian Hartline would have, not to take anything away from Vernell Brown, but this is kind of the direction that they would go.
Well, Coop, I had the same thought, and it's kind of like, all right, building out, you always bring it up with your wide receiver room, building out a basketball team, and they haven't had that inside receiver that is more of a chunk play guy, make you miss in space. And Vernell Brown, he's a blur on tape. He's a guy that, turns the 5-yard gain into a 15-yard gain. And I think what's interesting about him is, in this update, we moved him into the top 247, right? He went 4.51 on the lasers at the Under Armour camp there in Orlando a few months ago. But I also think he could be a DB at the Power 4 level. And he visited Syracuse last week. Fran Brown is now there. Took an early midweek visit. I don't know if it was his spring break, and the Orange are telling him, hey, you can be a 3-phase playmaker for us. I think it's an interesting twist to that recruitment. And, maybe we should have listed Vernell Brown as an athlete, because I do think he could get it done in the secondary. He did it on Friday nights at Orlando Jones High School. He did it before that at Wildwood High School outside of Gainesville. I think you got to keep an eye on the Florida schools here. This just feels like a big 3 battle. Dad obviously played at UF. It was an electric punt returner himself, and a guy that actually got snaps on both sides of the ball back when kind of Urban Meyer was running the show there. So Ohio State, he's playing for South Florida Express. They have a tie to Columbus. A lot of those receivers end up there, but I think that recruitment's going to have plenty of twists and turns, and he seems to be a guy that wants to visit everywhere, like you said, Tom.
Drew, how strong is that South Florida Express? And for those of you that don't know SFE, as they call it, the organization on the 7-on-7 circuit, but you think about the guys that they have had, right, at the receiver position, and name a few. Brandon Ennis was one. I believe Carnell Tate, another one. Drew, you could probably go down the line here. When's the last time that they had a top 100 receiver that didn't go to Ohio State? It's a legitimate question. I'm trying to think of that in my head.
JoJo Trader, he went to Miami, but Jeremiah Smith, Brian Hartline's got it locked down. And if you spend some time around the SFE guys, they will always show you the photo of Hartline on his back patio, rocking the SFE sweater, puffing on a cigar. So as long as Hartline's there, and he does an excellent job, right? You bump into him on the road down. I've seen him at St. Thomas Aquinas, American Heritage, Cardinal Gibbons, all those schools. So Hakeem Williams, another one. He went to Florida State. I don't know how involved the Buckeyes there were with him, but certainly Ohio State seems to have the first pick when it comes to those SFE pass catchers.
Just to add on that real quick, I mean, I completely agree with you, Ivins. I don't think this one is done by any stretch. And Florida State's the other school I'm watching. Like you said, I know you were talking about the big 3. So when I asked him 2 official visits he has to take, it was Ohio State and it was Florida State. So again, while I think Ohio State has the edge and I feel good about the crystal ball, today was signing day. I mean, I'm not even close to ruling out Norvell and Florida State.
Guys, if you are watching the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast, just a reminder, we got a new time slot. We are no longer 5 o'clock Eastern time on Tuesday and Wednesday. We are now live on Tuesday and Wednesday at 11 o'clock Central, 12 o'clock Eastern time. And the other thing is, you might have seen the stream on your Twitter timeline or X. Guys, that's a great place to watch the show. But if you have a question, make sure to get to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. You can submit it there as well. We will get to viewer questions at the end of the show. Tom will also be answering questions as well. So if there's more recruiting, scouting questions, we can handle everything on this episode. Tom, a lot of Miami fans watch this show, and I think a lot of them would be excited to learn that you were pretty close on firing a couple crystal balls on two guys that are pretty highly coveted.
Yeah, after this weekend, being around those guys, the raw 7-on-7 team, I like Amari Wallace to land at Miami. I'm going to join Zach Blostein and Gabby Uridia with the Hurricanes pick there. LSU, Penn State, Florida, Syracuse, all pushing hard. It's a very coveted safety. But I just think at this point, I feel great about putting Cristobal pick in for Miami. I think they're the team to beat, and I think they're really setting the bar in his recruitment.
Drew, Amari Wallace, we talked about him on yesterday's show, so I don't think we need to go over the player there. Talk to me about Cortez Mills, and here's where we are if you're watching the show right now. I've explained it last week when we had the 2025 update. We're still doing positional cross checks, right? So a lot of these guys we're filtering out for the first time. Drew, I don't think you've had receiver yet, right? But you are familiar with Cortez Mills, obviously being from the state of Florida. I'll tell you this, man, I got to pop on the tape, and it was the first time I got to watch him. I liked the tape, but I really liked what he did at the Miami Combine earlier this year.
Yeah, I think he made a case to be the alpha dog on the offensive side. It went to Joshua Moore, another South Florida receiver, kind of the complete opposite of Cortez Mills, a big outside prototypical X. I think with Cortez Mills, what's interesting with him is you can play him on the inside, you can play him on the outside. He's a dynamic route runner, right? Creates separation, wins with his release. And then you dig into the tape, Coop, like you said, Homestead has made the state title game down there, at the southernmost point of Florida before the Keys. Like, he has been a big reason why. Back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons receiving. He's a guy that can get open. And I think it's, you look at, and I know Tom will get into the recruitment, official visits lined up, I believe, to Penn State. Clemson's in there, some other schools, Florida. He's a guy that just gets the job done. No verified speed markers, but I think he's quick and he can get open, like I said. So, I know Miami has sunk their teeth into Cortez Mills, and not surprised to hear Tom feeling the Hurricanes a little bit.
Yeah, I think Miami's certainly trying to address the receiver position. I'd love this pickup, obviously, being able to keep a guy like this in state. Tom, where is Cortez Mills in terms of maybe a decision timeline? Is this something that could get done sooner rather than later?
Yeah, I didn't expect to necessarily want to put a Cristobal pick in heading into the weekend, but I'm feeling like Miami's the team to beat here, and I feel good enough to put that prediction in. So more good news for the Hurricanes at this point, at least from a Cristobal perspective. But I will say the one team I'm really watching is Nebraska. I think they're a big player here. He loves that staff. I called it Flowbraska. He's talking about all the guys that have landed at Nebraska or how hard they're recruiting the state of Florida. Also looking at Clemson and Florida. He's going to take 4 official visits to all of those schools. And there's about 5 or 6 other teams still trying to, land that 5th official visit if he decides to take it that far. But right now, I think Miami's the team to beat. And after watching him in New Orleans, before he left the field with a concussion after an unbelievable 50-50 ball win, I think his 3rd of the weekend, incredible performance. I think this would be a massive pickup for Miami.
Any context on Flowbraska?
Well, his former head coach is on staff there in Lincoln, and there is a ton of guys from South Florida that have gone up to Nebraska. My favorite is when they enroll early, and then you see the photos on their social media of all the snow. I think reality hits pretty fast.
That went way over my head. I had no idea. I didn't know it was linked with the state of Florida. So now I completely understand. I had something. I was thinking about hair in my head. I didn't really understand it, but neither here nor there. All right, Tom, let's move on. Nashawn Montgomery. This is a guy that's been highly courted throughout the process as well. Number 38 receiver in the country. You think Penn State is in a good position to lock this one down?
Yeah, Alabama, Florida, Oregon, LSU, Ohio State, all pushing. But right now, I think the Nittany Lions get it done. I'm feeling good enough to put a Cristobal pick in for Penn State. I think, again, after watching him make a ton of plays, I don't think he was as consistent necessarily as I wanted to see out of the 2 days. But man, he's a big play waiting to happen. A lot to like there. Runs well. Again, I think that would be, and Jawan Sider is doing a really good job there. He obviously does a great job in the state of Florida, as I'm sure Andrew Ivins can tell you. But man, I think this would be a nice pickup for Penn State, and I feel really good about Montgomery landing there.
Drew, what do you think? We know Penn State needs some receiver help, and we'll see how much more time Drew Aller has. It's certainly an area that they need to address. What would you think about this potential fit?
Oh, they got a volume shoot. I mean, Nashon Montgomery, interesting one to follow. Originally from Rhode Island, spent this past season down at Cardinal Newman. Now he's going to go to Miami Central, and Miami Central's turned into a transfer hub. Beckham Kritza, Penn State quarterback commit there. Keandre Baker, Penn State running back commit, just transferred in from Texas. So this could be a potential third Miami Central Rocket headed to Penn State. It's on the rundown. We're going to talk about Kekai Lockett in Penn State. I believe that visit's taking place here later this week. That's the one that really kind of fires me up. But Nashon Montgomery, we've seen him, another really good route runner, gets open, just on-field production, maybe not on par with some of the guys ahead of him in the rankings to date.
We're going to talk about Kekai Lockett, the number 2 receiver in the country out of Texas. Listen, I know Penn State needs receiver help. I find that one pretty fascinating from a geographical standpoint, that's where you're kind of going to invest. We can talk about that a little bit later. Nashon Montgomery would certainly be a big pull for Penn State. Penn State, typically more on the defensive side, has had some success in the state of Florida to see if they can get it done at the receiver position as well. Guys, I mentioned it. We're over 1,000 viewers on X right now. That's big time. So make sure to like and subscribe to the show. You can also find us on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Like I said, Tuesday, Wednesday, noon Eastern time. That is a new spot for the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast. I mentioned Tom was not wearing sunscreen over the weekend at Battle New Orleans, a 7-on-7 tournament. Tom, by the way, what was the wife's reaction when you got home?
She said it was basically a typical trip for me to be in the sun. It happens every time I go somewhere. I get way too much color, and but I'm feeling good. There's no pain, but I have not. There's been some rough moments in my time, so I feel good.
All right. That's all right, buddy. We'll get you dialed. Still early in the Combine 7-on-7 season. All right, let's get to it. Battle New Orleans, always a great event. Tom, the Alpha Dog, TCU quarterback commit, Ty Hawkins, the number 15 quarterback in the country. He's hanging in the top 247 on the back end for us right now. What'd you like from him in New Orleans?
Everything. He was phenomenal for 2 straight days. Just threw the ball extremely well, was very accurate. Loved the velocity. He was layering it really well. I mean, he was making all the throws and leading his team. Now, again, he was working with Raw, and they are loaded at the receiver position. We talked about Cortez Mills, Donovan Olub. I mean, they are loaded across the board. Nashon Montgomery. So a lot to like there. But, man, he looked great all weekend long. They fell just short to DEFCON Texas in the final. But everything about this kid, man, he put it together for 2 straight days. And as of now, TCU is getting a good one. I know Ole Miss and Cal, a couple others are pushing for him, but says he's rock solid in his commitment to TCU, and that is a great pickup for the Horned Frogs.
Drew, you like that fit, especially, they took Hoss Haney last year. I mean, they seem to Kendall Briles obviously seems to have a profile.
He does, and I do like that fit for Ty Hawkins. I think he's one of the best legitimate dual threat talents when we talk about these 2025 signal callers. Like, he could bear the load of a run game. He's already ran for 2,000 yards. When I was around him at Battle Miami, I thought the frame and the size stood out. And I think Tom has had that same reaction. He kind of reminds me of the former USF quarterback BJ Daniels. I don't know if you remember him from a few years ago. Had a cup of tea in the league, hung around. I think he's back on staff at USF, but he can run the RPOs, the design draws, all that stuff. He's excellent at it. And then as a passer, I think he can touch the deeper corners of the field. Really, really good long ball. You dig into the tape from his junior season, final game, he threw like 6 picks in the first half. That was a bit of a rough one, but a guy that's not afraid to throw it into the teeth of coverage. I love the fit for TCU. And you said it. I mean, they go Hoss Haney, who was another extremely dynamic runner. They're following it up with Ty Hawkins. I mean, it's going to make it where the offense, they don't need to shift it around there in Fort Worth and cater to whatever quarterback's under center. They're going to be able to keep that quarterback run game going. So I'm a fan of Ty Hawkins.
I don't know how projectable the skill set is to Sundays at the end of the day, but in terms of gamer, really good college football prospect, like I love the way that Ty Hawkins kind of fits in that offense. Into Ty Hawkins's defense, I think that's originally how we viewed Hoss Haney, right? Until Hoss Haney kind of showed up at the Elite 11 in Austin, showed out there. We got to see him at the All-American Bowl as well. I think had a good week of practice. I think the game was obviously expected some ups and downs, but excited about Hoss Haney and Ty Hawkins as well. All right, a couple other standouts from New Orleans, Tom. Vernell Brown, we talked about him earlier, crystal ball for Ohio State as you fire that in. But the other guy that I want to touch on, and here's my guy. I called Andrew this morning, call Andrew about 2 or 3 times in the morning before we get on the show and obviously distract him. But Donovan Olub from IMG Academy, and this is a guy we snuck in the back end of the top 247. Drew, you and I were talking about it. He's got 11-inch mids, and typically you talk about that, and you wonder how it kind of translates a little bit. That IMG Pro Day that you went to a couple weeks ago, he was putting on a show. I think he's got some of the strongest hands in the country. Tom, I'm pretty interested to hear what you have to say about Donovan Olub and how he did in the Big Easy.
You know, for all the success Ty Hawkins had, I mean, it's because he was throwing to Olub, and he, you know, he's a big, strong, physical kid, but he runs faster than I expected. I mean, I don't have the testing times. I'm sure you guys do, but he just runs so much better than you would assume when you see him from a physical standpoint. And I'm excited to cut the tape up and show you guys how he looked this week. And I'll have that at 24/7 Sports probably within the next 24 hours. But he was just separating with ease, using his big size. And I mean, he was working at all 3 spots. I mean, he was fun to watch, man. But from the recruiting standpoint, Ohio State, Oregon, he's going to visit both. He's got Ohio State in March. He's going to be at Oregon in April. That'll be his second visit to Eugene. He's going to return for a third time for an official visit in June, from what I've gathered. He's also expected to visit official visit Ohio State as well. USC is going to be in play. I think he might even already have an official visit locked in there as well. Also watching Tennessee and Missouri, but either way, super coveted talent, and he seems to be pretty wide open. A lot of visits still to come, but man, he's better than I anticipated and was great this weekend.
Olubide?
Yeah, that's what I gathered is how you pronounce his last name.
I wish you would have told me that before we started the show.
We should have asked.
You live and you learn. Drew, what are your thoughts on this kid?
Well, I was going to say, you know, rule of thumb, IMG kid originally from Illinois. You know, where's the Big Ten flavor? And then I realized Oregon's and USC are both headed to the Big Ten. Biggest hands I've shaken in this cycle. Like you said, at 11-inch mids, you put on that cut up from the pro day at IMG Academy. He caught 4 straight like posts with one hand, routes on air, but it was still impressive. Tom, you want to know about the testing numbers? He's like a 4.69 guy on the lasers, but I think he's a polished route runner, a ton of nuance to his game. I think high floor prospect. A guy that can step in ready to play size. You know, is he going to be a true number 1 wide receiver game breaker? I don't know about that, but that's just a guy that I could see starting 30, 40 games at the Power 4 level and being a reliable option. And what's interesting about these wide receivers at IMG, you know, Carnell Tate's been there. You know, they don't get a ton of balls that come their way. And you look at Donovan, I think he was around 500 yards as a junior. They might try to ramp that up here in 2024. So it's a difficult evaluation in the sense of, okay, you know, there's not a ton to go off of, but every time you see him, you walk away and you're like, blue star prospect for me. I'm going to bet on this guy working out.
The other thing about him is that, you turn on the tape, you see the frame, over 200 pounds, super physical. I thought he was really good as a route runner, at least on air, right? And then you go and you watch the tape, big, physical, red zone target. I like this kid a lot. We got him in at, where we have him, Drew, the back of, 238. But I mean, quite honestly, a guy that I've kind of asterisked and, one of my favorite guys, quite honestly, that I've watched at the receiver position and admittedly haven't been through the whole crop there. So we'll keep an eye on him as we go forward. Glad we got the pronunciation right. A couple other names, Bryce Fitzgerald, Jabari Antoine, the commit to the in-state school, LSU. But Drew, I guess I'll start with you, and then we'll circle back on Tom. Bryce Fitzgerald, man, I got to to turn on the tape this morning, number 204, number 18 safety in the country. What did he pop, like a 4.38 a couple months ago, right? At the Miami camp. I like this kid a lot.
4.4.
There you go.
Former basketball player, right? And he started off at Berlin Jesuit, now at Miami Columbus. Didn't play hoops this year. That's because Carlos Boozer's 2 sons were at Miami Columbus. Hard to get in that rotation. They won a state title. So Bryce has transitioned to more of playing football this past year. I think 10 takeaways. What also stands out about him, besides the testing profile and the on-field production, young for the grade. I'm interested to hear where Tom thinks Bryce is looking. I believe USC's involved. I think he's a guy that some schools will push up the board as these spring months progress and we get closer to commit season there in June.
Yeah, USC is definitely involved. He's going to take an official visit there in June. Florida as well in June for an official visit, and then Miami as well in June at the end of the month. So a couple still to add to his list, but at least 2 of the big 3 there are pushing hard for him. But he does have an unofficial to Florida State in March. So clearly they're in play. And, if we're looking at adding an official visit or 2 at the end of June, then that could be a clear contender there with the Seminoles. Florida on March 23rd, and then Miami on March 30th. But man, I cannot tell you guys enough. This kid, like if there was one guy that blew me away more than anybody, of a guy that I knew was really talented, but a guy that I just think can make a ton of money at the safety position down the road, it was Fitzgerald. I mean, he didn't take a play off either. Like he was making high-level plays on both sides of the ball, sprinting from one side of the field back to the other to play offense. And this kid just moves at a different pace, and the game's really easy for him, making a ton of pass breakups. So yeah, Coop, I'll stay in my lane, but this guy, stock up all the way, man, after watching him for 2 days.
Hey, we're not in studio anymore, man. Just, you can swerve, do whatever you want, put your scouting cap on and just let it rip. Guys, we do have some breaking news, according to Matt Zenitz of 24/7 Sports, reporting that Ohio State's Tony Alford is heading to Michigan to be the new running back coach. Guys, if you have questions in the chat, obviously that's a big deal for a lot of different reasons, right? I mean, you're talking about how often do you see a coach go from one school to the other? Last guy I could think of, Tom, you would know this, Al Washington, right?
Oh, yeah.
Going from Michigan to Ohio State. Now you have vice versa. Tony Alford, who's one of the most respected coaches in the country at that position.
Well, let Tom cook here. He's familiar with Tony Alford. What type of recruiter, I guess, is leaving Columbus and headed to Ann Arbor?
He recruited Donovan Edwards pretty hard, and it looks like now he's going to finally get to coach him. But known Tony a long time, terrific recruiter, great human being. I first met him when he was at Notre Dame before making the jump to Ohio State, and tremendous recruiter. He is all about relationships, great ball coach, but for him, it's all about the relationships. He's a high-level recruiter. He's hit the portal hard. He's doing it at the high school level. And he was a big addition for Ohio State over the last couple of years. And I think he's going to do a phenomenal job at Michigan. I think this is a really, really good hire. And I think he's going to have that running back room cooking for the next couple of years.
Does this change anything with any of the top running backs out there?
I mean, that's probably too early to tell. But I think that he's absolutely going to help Michigan land somebody that right now, if we were projecting somebody to land at Michigan, it wouldn't be the same guy. I think he's going to do a lot for the Wolverines, man. They are, this is the kind of addition you need from a recruiting standpoint when you have a coaching change. And like I said, very excited about, if you're a Michigan fan, you should be very, very excited about this hire.
Tom, your best guess. Why would he make this move?
It could just simply be wanting to get promoted, move to that next level, and then maybe he sees an opportunity at Michigan over the next couple of years. But I know he was involved for, I think, a head coaching job at Colorado State, never came his way. He's always seemed to get passed up for a lot of opportunities that happened at Notre Dame. I mean, I don't know, maybe, Bill Kurelic and the boys over at Bucknuts, they probably have a better idea how things were going at Ohio State. But I can only see that this is an opportunity for him to take the next level, take the next step in his coaching career. I know he wants to be a head coach one day, and I think he'd be a great one. But up until now, it just really hasn't been an opportunity, and maybe just sees a better fit at Michigan.
We got a question from Sir Weezy in the chat. Any names that come to mind to replace Alford? I mean, I guess I'll go. I mean, my first call would be Tashard Choice at Texas. And I think it would be very difficult to pluck Tashard Choice out of Austin. That being said, you're Ohio State. And if they have the same type of alignment that they have shown on the recruiting trail when it comes to coaching acquisition, yeah, then I think it's, everybody's going to entertain Ohio State when you think about the lineage of running backs that they've had as well. And, Texas certainly has their claim to that too. And, I'm sure Tashard Choice is very comfortable over there. But, Drew, that would be my first call. I know I'm putting you on the spot. I don't know if there's a name that comes to mind, maybe more so than the others. But if I was Ohio State, that would be the first guy I was calling.
Well, I think he's the best in this current landscape in terms of you look at the running backs Texas has brought in recent years or recent cycles. He's made a name for himself, right? He got Jahmyr Gibbs when he was at Georgia Tech, Cedric Baxter at Texas, a few other guys involved. I feel like running back's the one position coach where there's been just so much movement, like so many names have jumped around, so many guys have left for the NFL. There isn't really – I don't have a short list when it comes to the running back coaches.
Who's Penn State's running back coach?
Jordan Sider. Yeah, that'd be a good hire. I think he does a really good job, especially from a recruiting standpoint. But I think that's tough, man. Tashard Choice would be a massive hire, man. That would be, man.
Boys just putting on their tinfoil hats right now, just reacting to news. Hashtag raw oysters. If you got more questions later in the show, that's what we're going to call the Q&A segment.
So Sider gets them even more embedded in South Florida.
Yeah, and you would think, from a geographical standpoint, I mean, it's very easy to say this, but from the receiver position, obviously, the three states, right? When you think about it, Florida, Texas, and Georgia, right? Georgia's now number 3. Florida and Texas seem to take turns every year in terms of producing NFL talent. I think that is very well reflected in the top 247 as well. So that would be fascinating for sure. I mean, and you look at Ohio State, their roster right now, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Dallin Hayden, James Peoples from the state of Texas. I think there was a question earlier in the chat. Are any of those guys a threat to potentially enter the portal in the spring? I don't know. I kind of look at Dallin Hayden a little bit, and I'm kind of like, where does he fit in the equation, right? He has shown some flashes there. So I don't know. That would maybe be a name to keep an eye on as we kind of inch towards the spring portal.
I will say Notre Dame fans won't love this, but I absolutely – and he just got a title promotion and more money, but Dylan McCullough would be a guy that I absolutely think they should target, and they probably will, at least to have that phone call. So he's been really successful as a recruiter and a coach. I don't know, something to keep an eye on.
Curtis Looper at Missouri, right? What he did with Cody Schrader.
For sure. So how many names we got now? I think we got 3.
4.
Basically have the big board ready.
Yeah. We're ready. Call the boys. We're ready to go. So there you go. Some breaking news via our Matt Zenitz. Does an incredible job. If you're not following him on X, make sure to do that as well. All right, putting a bow on Battle New Orleans, getting back on track here. Tom, I would say your biggest overall recruiting takeaway, maybe in terms of getting some intel on a prospect or two that maybe kind of raise your eyebrows a little bit.
I'd probably say Blaine Bradford, the elite safety. I think you guys have him in the top 10 in 2026. He's really close to a decision. He told me that he was going to make a decision before the start of his junior season. And that makes me question, again, this is completely spitballing. I don't know if a reclassifying is potentially in the works at all, but it seems early for a 26 guy like that caliber to make a decision that quickly. But right now, I'm watching Notre Dame, LSU, and Texas. I think my best guess at this point would probably be him staying at home playing for LSU. But he's going to announce top 5 soon, and then he's going to make a commitment, like I said, before his junior season. And just 2 other guys I want to mention. Eric Winters, top 100 linebacker in 2025, was playing safety all weekend, looked great at that position. And then top 100 edge rusher, Zion Grady. I see both of these coming down to Auburn versus Georgia. I know Bama's kind of back in play after a good visit with Grady, who was once committed there. But really, I think at this point, if both made a decision, you'd have Auburn and Georgia hats on the table. Winters is going to make a decision before then. He's going to make a decision before his senior season, actually well before that. He told me he wants to make a decision in April and then take either the official visit to a school that he chooses or a couple other official visits. But then Grady seems like he's a little bit of a ways, at least a couple months from making a final decision. But Tigers or Bulldogs for him. We'll see if the Crimson Tide can make a move there and kind of get back into it. But man, maybe, and we'll see if they're a package deal. But yeah, those are the two teams to watch for two of the best players in America.
Auburn, Drew. I'm telling you, man, now it's starting to become a little bit more, you hear Georgia, and now you hear Auburn. Auburn's in the mix for everybody. I'm glad you brought up Eric Winters because it wasn't the first time that we've kind of discussed. Is he a linebacker? I think he's a good enough athlete to kind of play that star nickel role, so we'll see what happens with him. Tom, I'll give you another opportunity here. One player that you came away from this event that you said, all right, I'm going to go to Andrew Ivins. I'm going to go to Cooper Petagna. I'm going to go to the rest of the guys at the scouting group, and this is going to be the guy that I'm standing on the table for.
I mean, it was really Bryce Fitzgerald in terms of like seeing like elite talent. But if we can talk about two quick guys in 25, I would say Courtney Patterson, 3-star defensive back. I really liked what he did. Mississippi State, UCF, South Florida also in play there, Missouri. And then another one in Louisiana was Zay Martin, currently unranked, doesn't have an offer list. It's going to blow you away. His best offer is from Georgia Tech, but he was super productive. I thought he had a really good weekend. He may have caught, and they didn't make the finals or even close to the finals. And he may have caught more balls than anybody over the weekend. And then lastly, in 2026, and Ivins, we already talked about him, but Jonas Williams, a quarterback out of Illinois, class of 2026. This was a guy that, and I said to Ivins, I said, this is a guy that, in my opinion, down the road, he will be a top 100 player. He's already got Minnesota, Michigan, Missouri offers, Michigan State as well. I know he wants, and he's going to camp or visit Alabama, Ohio State, and a couple others. Ohio State, if they offer, that might quickly become the team to beat. But after watching this guy play for Boom Football, the 7-on-7 team out of Illinois for 2 days, I was blown away by how talented this kid is. He was making all the throws. But yeah, standing on the table for Jonas Williams, he's the real deal.
Sounds like no one had a bad weekend at Battle.
Really, I did. You see my face? I did.
Hey, we're teaching you well. Patterson's brother 2 years ago led the NCAA in interceptions at Middle Tennessee. I think he had like 9. Zay Martin, right? That was his name. His brother is in the NFL. So look, bloodlines, we're training you up here.
You guys, very good to me. I appreciate it.
Guys, we see you in the chat, and we love it, especially Michael, Dallas fan, INDC1, Campbell. I mean, dude, you're all over the chat right now. Huge Notre Dame fan, just bringing the noise in there. Guys, if you want to talk some trash, it's a good place to do it. Keep it PG for us, though. Guys, like I said, the 24/7 Sports Football Recruiting Podcast every Tuesday and Wednesday. You can find us at noon Eastern time. What about Thursday? We talk about this all the time. What about Monday? What about Thursday? Well, on Thursday, you can find 24/7 Sports Live. That is still at 5 o'clock Eastern time. We got a great show for you tomorrow. Carl Reed, Smoke Dixon, myself will join. We'll talk a little NFL draft. Also, guys, we have over 2,000 people watching the show right now on X. If you have a question, you can ask it there, but we would appreciate it if you went to the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe. That certainly helps us out a bunch. All right, as we get to the transaction wire, Drew, we talked a little bit about him yesterday, more in the context of Andrew Babaloa, but the #1 offensive tackle in the country. It seems like this relationship is a budding relationship between David Sanders Jr. and Clemson. And I got to be honest, Drew, you can call it sneaky. I think you and I have talked about it a lot. I think it's going to be one of those things in a couple months where I think everybody's going to be talking about it. I think Matt Luke was one of the best hires that we saw all offseason.
Yeah, can we claim that take?
We can claim it. Nobody will listen. But
is it time stamped anywhere? I think it's notable that Sanders was back at Clemson over the weekend because that's his second visit there since the new year. And he hasn't visited anywhere else, 6 schools in the mix. I think he's going to get to Georgia, Tennessee in the near future. We know that the Tigers aren't going to go in the transfer portal, right? So now you think about a prototypical left tackle, which they can nurture and develop. Pops to me in terms of, okay, contenders for David Sanders Jr.
Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but Josh Petty was also on campus there too, huh?
I believe that's correct. Yeah, they are. Yeah, they're big players for both those guys. So
and Zaire Addison,
Braden Jacobs already committed, right, in the boat.
Eaton Ware.
Yeah, they're doing some things over there, and trust me, if there's one thing that I appreciate from Clemson, I think it has been the call to action and the urgency when it comes to high school, especially at the point of attack. That is a position unit that they need to get right and they need to flip. They're certainly trying to do that. A couple trips coming up per Steve Wiltfong, Georgia, Alabama as well. I kind of like where Clemson's sitting right now. We'll see what happens in terms of a timeline for the number one offensive tackle in the country. Tom, what you got?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in there because I believe Anna Adams, our national reporter at 24/7 Sports, I think she even reported this morning that he's going back to Clemson today with a couple of people. So again, I've been. This was when we talked about Crystal Walls heading into this show. I considered it. I was really thinking about David Sanders to Clemson, but man, then you tell me he's going back today. Good scoop from Anna there.
This is not a shock to the system at all, but typically what I've seen, especially from my time working on the personnel side, those return visits within that short of a timeline typically lead to a commitment. Yeah. Anytime we had a player, because what I'm saying here is more than likely that visit was probably spurred, if I had to guess, spurred by David Sanders' camp more so than it was by Clemson. And it sounds like at that point, it's you're checking the last few boxes.
Right. That's always it feels like a one decision maker had to join in, right?
Correct. So Clemson might be getting close. That's, if I'm reading between the lines there, that's kind of what I'm thinking with David Sanders. How huge would that be, for Clemson
Tom,
to be able to get that done?
Fired in low confidence score.
Peer pressure crystal balls. That's what we're about over here. Force it in, Tom. Put it in.
We still got a little time in the show. Maybe I'll do it right before the end.
All right. A couple other guys we want to talk about. We talked about Kekai Lockett earlier, but it seems like Florida State kind of rocked his world a little bit in a very positive way if you're a Noles fan. The number 2 player in the country, 5-star, number 11 overall. He'll visit Penn State on Thursday, but it seems like this was, set up really more as an introduction in terms of the visit. Mike Norvell has got a background coaching receivers. I think that really appealed to Kekai Lockett. I don't know how you feel about this one, Drew. I mean, I think Florida State's really kind of, you think about guys like Keon Coleman, you think about guys like Johnny Wilson, what they've been able to do at the receiver position as of late. Think about Hakeem Williams is there as well. Get really excited about his future. I kind of like this fit on paper, Kekai Lockett at Florida State.
My big takeaway here is Khalil's recruitment, I think, is finally reflecting what we think of him, right? And when we shot him up in the rankings, I think it was like LSU. I mean, the in-state schools had offered, but wasn't a ton of widespread national interest. So now, okay, Florida State, Mike Norvell, they get him on campus over the weekend. Now he's going to go to Penn State. We can talk about the Nittany Lions here in a second, but I think he would absolutely fit in that wide receiver room. And you look at what the Seminoles took last cycle at the position. I mean, Kekai could be, wide receiver 1 of the future there in Tallahassee. So to me, and maybe Tom, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, it just feels like this recruitment is starting to take shape, right? Some of these ones like David Sanders, it's narrowing down. Kekai Lockett, it's like, okay, now we'll know 2 months from now who's really a player in it. It's going to completely change, in my opinion.
Yeah, Florida State's definitely in play, probably much more than they were heading into this visit. But and I fully expect him to return for an official visit. Mike Norvell's doing a great job, and he's got I think you mentioned it earlier, he's got Penn State this week, so they're gonna take a swing and get a shot there. But for me, the one I keep going back to is Texas A&M. And the first time I talked to him, he kind of lit up talking about him and talked about some connections there with the Aggies. And I don't know, there's just something about them where I could see Texas A&M, Mike Elko making a big splash and getting it done there. Official visits, he's got USC and Texas, the only ones that are lined up in June from what I gathered. But I will say, football fans, recruiting fans, I'm not sure there's going to be, and I'm confident in my ability, I'm not sure there's going to be a better source than our own Mike Roach when it comes to Kekai Lockett. That guy is plugged in with everybody and everyone around Kekai Lockett, and I think he's going to be one to keep an eye on. So if you see a crystal ball come in from Mike Roach, we're going to be digging on it. But, man, that one's going to be put that thing and stamp it in gold because, Mike Roach is the guy on this one.
Kekai Lockett's recruitment feels aligned, should I say. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, I think we kind of saw what happened with Hakeem Williams. You got You mentioned Texas A&M. And what I mean by that, guys, is that, Kekai Lockett's going to get paid, just to make it as simple and as clear as possible. So we'll see what happens with Kekai Lockett. Long way to go.
Can we talk about the Penn State visit? This
Yes.
is what
Yes.
I think the
You
Nittany Lions.
like it?
Yeah, I love it. This is what they need to do, right? Brandon Marcella wrote a story. I think he's writing a roster series. Like, what is the issue for Penn State? I think it's the pass catchers, not the tight ends. I think it's the perimeter playmakers. I don't think they've given Drew Aller enough weapons, right? It's easy to poke holes in his game. Well, it's like, hey, guys aren't getting open. Guys aren't being reliable. And, okay, now they're finally getting what we would consider, and I think other people would consider him, a premier talent at the position on campus. I said it last year, like, why didn't they take a swing at Cam Coleman? Why didn't they take a swing at some, a Courtney Crutchfield or something like this? It's like, okay, finally, Penn State is going to do it. So out of region receiver, I'm all for it. That one fires me up in terms of the visits. And it's like, okay, this is what Penn State needs to do.
Can I push back for a second?
Okay.
The recruitment that I would point to is Tamarian Parker, who was committed to Penn State before he ultimately decommitted just a few weeks later. He ends up at Clemson. It's very difficult. I don't understand. Listen, I love the effort, especially being able to invest a lot of time in the number 2 receiver in the country. Obviously, it's a position of need, but I think you're spinning your wheels, and I could be wrong here. And the reason I say that is because Tom just mentioned Texas A&M. You got Florida State. I think both those teams, from a development standpoint, let's put Texas A&M to the side there a little bit, but Florida State certainly from a player development standpoint at that position certainly have the leg up. And that doesn't mean you don't compete for somebody like Kekai Lockett. I just think ultimately in this day and age, and what I mean by that, in this day and age of NIL, that is going to be a very difficult recruitment, not only to hang around in, but ultimately at the end of the day, win. And I think knowing what your opposition looks like when you have schools like Florida State and Texas A&M, who have certainly proven their worth when it comes to NIL, I think Penn State, Drew, like for me, like the receiver from IMG. Tom, what's the pronunciation there? Olubide, right? Originally from Illinois, right? You got him tucked in there, and sure, you got Ohio State, you got Oregon. You get to know the field there a little bit, but Ohio State, they're close to picking up Jamie French. They're close to picking up Vernell Brown. Oregon, at the end of the day, is going to have options with Junior Adams. It's a long way away. To me, I think that kind of comes into place, and I think that the geographical roots of the player for a program like Penn State ultimately make this extremely difficult given the profile of a guy like Kekai Lockett. Well, the intent is absolutely correct. The execution of it. And here's the thing that I will say, being on that side, I get it. Here's the other thing. The rest of your board takes the hit for that time invested on that one player. So you better be able to execute, right? And that's where I come from on this. So, aim small, miss small type of thing. And who knows, Penn State might have a really good in with Kekai Lockett that I don't know about, or maybe they've been recruiting him for, a lot longer of a time than, school X, Y, and Z.
I couldn't agree more. I don't see any way that Penn State gets this done. And I think on an even playing field a couple years back, before NIL became a thing, you get this kid on campus for a whiteout game in the fall. I mean, they got a real shot. But now with the way that A&M wants to play the game, Florida State and a couple others, I hate to say it, but I just don't think Penn State can get it done.
Have you guys been to a game at Penn State? Like,
I have.
Geez, man, you guys are. Wow.
I just said that I think that if they got him on campus for a whiteout game, I was there for Penn State Ohio State a while back, and it's maybe the greatest game day atmosphere I've ever been to. But we're talking about him visiting on March 14th and then turning around and being like, all right, well, he can get a couple $100,000 more from another school. It's just I don't see it, man.
There's two sides of the coin, and here's the thing: it's not Ohio State. Ohio State's got the receiver development. Penn State does not have that. This is one of their worst position groups right on their roster. So I think outside of them just giving them Kekai Lockett a bag that is nowhere close to what another school like A&M or Florida State would give, I'd have a hard time. Drew, I have been to Penn State, got absolutely worked there when I was in Michigan in 2017. And quite honestly, never enjoyed an environment more in my life. And that's from a guy grew up South Louisiana and went to LSU. I think it's one of the most electric environments in all of college football. That goes without saying. But I don't think you're right or wrong. I don't think I'm right or wrong. It's just two sides of the coin.
Let me get my final word in here, and we can move to the next.
All right, go ahead.
Pennsylvania is only churning out a Tyler Boyd and a Jahan Dotson, it seems like, every other year. So I personally applaud Penn State for going out of region to try to find a difference maker at the position. You guys can push back all you want. I think it's what they need to do.
Here's what I would say.
Shoot under par every time I play golf, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Right. Good job, good effort. Let me know if you can get it done. That's what I'll chalk it up to. All right, Mario Nash Jr., number 18, interior offensive lineman in the country, highly ranked 3-star out of the state of Mississippi. He's got June OVs set to Mississippi State and USC. LSU also offered a few days ago. Drew, I'm playing catch up here. I mean, guys in my region, obviously I'm familiar with them, but if I remember correctly, you like this guy a lot coming off of Under Armour Atlanta.
Yeah, and I think for USC, okay, we talk about conference realignment, the landscape of the big bodies on the West Coast. Last year, the Trojans went into Florida, got Jason Zamandela, who's originally from Mozambique. I mean, interesting recruitment, but this is what they need to do, especially if they're going to be in a smash mouth conference. Mario Nash tweeted out the visit, I believe, yesterday. I love this. Like, get him to USC. And really, they're going to have to go head to head with the SEC. He's also got an official visit set up with the Bulldogs there. You think about Jeff Lebby. You want to talk about a program that's aligned. Jeff Lebby gets off the plane and he's got the collective on his polo. And then LSU, I mean, who's recruited the offensive line any better than them in recent cycles? So it's just one of those ones where it seems like last cycle, Trojans, you could poke some holes in their high school recruiting. Now this cycle at this stage in March, they're lining up a lot of big visits with a lot of guys that I think can play in the Big Ten. You mentioned Bryce Fitzgerald. Now it's Mario Nash. So certainly an interesting official visit that has been scheduled.
They've done some really positive things on the interior. I mean, you mentioned Zandamela, right? The year before, I think took another interior offensive lineman out of the state of Washington, blanking on the name, guy that we liked. Mario Nash, long way to go, especially like you're going to pull a kid out of Mississippi. Good luck, especially if you're USC. So we'll see what happens there. All right, last name on here, Marshall Pritchett, number 29 tight end in the country. March 23rd commitment date: Miami, Michigan, North Carolina, South Carolina, Wisconsin, Georgia Tech. That is a lot of names. Tom, do you have anything here on Marshall Pritchett?
I think, unless I'm being misled, I think North Carolina is probably in best spot to get his commitment. Georgia Tech has his brother as a walk-on linebacker, Lawson from last cycle. South Carolina, Wisconsin, still battling, still making it close. And actually, Michigan's turned up the heat on him a lot lately. But I just think, when he told me last week, we talked a little bit, and I had a UNC vibe. And there's some other schools that are making a run over the last couple of days. But with a decision date 10 days away, I talked to people at North Carolina this morning. They feel good about it. The other ones kind of feel like they have a shot. So at this point, my best guess would be the Tar Heels.
All right, there you go, Drew. Any insight on him from a scouting standpoint?
I love the profile, right? He is tight end, very late blooming position. Marshall, multi-sport guy, lacrosse player, former quarterback, has made that transition to pass catcher. I think he's a guy right now. What is he? TE 29. I think he's someone that has a chance to rise as we progress through the cycle. Always want to be hesitant with the tight end position because, Coop, you know this. The tight ends that you're seeing on your TV screen on Sundays and the ones that are going to be drafted here in a month from now, they were not playing tight end when they were sophomores and juniors in high school.
It's a late blooming position, for whatever reason. That just seems to be one that's, like, we talk about it all the time. Like, a lot of these are objective projections based on the data that we have. Tight end is such a instinctual position as well. So Marshall Pritchett, we'll see what happens there. North Carolina in a good spot. All right, guys, I mentioned it earlier. If you're on X or whether you're watching on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel, now is the time for what we're calling Raw Oysters. If you have raw questions, now is the time to ask them. We will get to them as we open it up for viewer questions. If there's anything on the recruiting side, that will sure be Tom Loy. If there's anything on the scouting side, Andrew and I will do our best to answer those questions. We talked a little bit about Tony Alford going from Ohio State to Michigan earlier in the show. Tom, we'll start with this one. How is Andrew Marsh's recruiting going, and where is he leaning?
Oh, I don't know if I have a favorite at this point. There's a lot of schools still in play. How about we shoot for next show? I can get you a full rundown, or at least give me 24 hours and I have a story of. But either way, man, I love that kid. Lots of like there. I'm sure you guys think highly of him as well. But yeah, I think there's a long way to go. So I don't think he's even close to making a decision.
Drew, I got asked this question the other day, and it's such a vague but important question, so maybe I'll try to offer it up to you and see if you can give a more compact answer. How do I get a star ranking?
I thought you were going to ask me about Andrew Marsh. I think the biggest thing is it's a process, right? So a lot of people think, all right, I got offered, I'm going to get ranked and I'm going to get graded. I mean, we are, yes, 24/7 Sports has analysts around the country, all different corners. Now, the biggest thing is to get ranked, like verified information. And this is not an advertisement for the UC report or those Under Armour camps. But I say this all the time. I tell high school coaches this all the time. If you have a student athlete or prospective student athlete, like the best thing you can do is get them to one of those Under Armour camps. And they have some combines you can sign up for. And I know there's like 900 million different camps out there charging money and all that stuff. You want to go to the Under Armour one because that's going to get you in the UC report. Not only do we get the verified data points from the UC report, but all the college coaches, what's their line, Cooper? 64 of 65 Power 5 programs. I know that's changed. Now we're in the Power 4, but they got FCS and Ivy. So, as we go through these regions, right, we are going to grade the guys first that we have some verified data points on, whether that be from track times, mile split, film is king. It is a process. And I think a lot of people are, why isn't this guy graded? Why isn't this guy graded? I mean, we're not trying to fire rapid evaluations. We're trying to pour through the tape. I mean, I don't know how many guys you watched this morning, Cooper. I've already watched 15. Okay. And I'm going to watch 25 more tonight and get some grades on there. So we want to get it right at the end of the day. So again, I think biggest thing, verified stuff, make sure your highlight tape's out there. Easy to find. The other advice I always get, make it so we can find you on social media, whether that be Instagram or Twitter. A lot of take 'em deep sixes out there. Don't know what that is. Okay. So that's another piece of advice. And that's just a drive-by on the whole process.
All right, Tom. Nonich wants to know, DJ Pickett, the 5-star. Are we calling him a corner or safety?
Corner.
DJ Pickett, the 5-star. If signing day was today, are the Miami Hurricanes the pick?
That's a tough one. I would still keep a close eye. I think the hats on the table would be Oregon, LSU, and Miami. It's tough to pick against the Hurricanes, but a good source here told me to keep a close eye on the Ducks all the way through till the end. So my best guess would be the Ducks as of today.
Whew. How about Miami? Oregon, I can see that battle. Dan Lanning, Mario Cristobal. Drew, your thoughts here?
Oh, I was going to say this to you. This is the one that Mario is going to sink his teeth into. This is the guy, right?
Feel it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, in no circumstance can you let Dan Lanning. I'll tell you this. I mean, the other thing, like, people don't know, like, that means something to Mario Cristobal, the fact that Dan Lanning's at Oregon now and, the arrow's kind of up and you see this ascending program. There's no way in hell, at least from an intent standpoint, that Mario Cristobal will let that happen. And if it does happen, there's a reason that we call Dan Lanning the Danimal, right? So I'd love to see it. It's like Godzilla, King Kong, man, on the recruiting trail. I'd love to see those two go at it. All right, Drew, here's a question I know you'll love. Why is Luke Nickel rated so low by 24/7 Sports? By the way, let me jump in there real quick. Luke Nickel is a 3-star 88. Okay, not everybody's a top 247 player. The other thing, that's a high priority free agent grade. Essentially, what we're saying is that this guy will have an opportunity to play in the NFL. That being said, I've laid out the context of the parameters of the conversation here, but Drew, floor is yours.
Well, I don't know about the other services, right? But we're being pretty conservative with our quarterback grades this cycle, which is the way I think it should be, right? You look at how many quarterbacks are selected every year in the NFL draft. That number is hovering around somewhere around 16 on average a year, and some of those higher years. Right now, I think, Coop, I don't have it pulled up. Maybe you have the next gen board. I think we got 16 in the top 247. You look at some of these other sites, they have 26 quarterbacks ranked inside their top 250 or 300 or whatnot. So, yeah, I know other people are looking at the rankings and these guys have them higher. We are being conservative with the quarterbacks. I think Luke Nickel saw him in person at the beginning of his junior season. I think there was a lot of questions, picked it up, won a state title at Milton. He's looked good on the 7-on-7 circuit. We're going to get him in the Elite 11 regional. Would not be surprised if he's in the Elite 11 finals. So stay tuned when it comes to the quarterbacks. But I like what I see. I think he's a full field reader, high processor, not the biggest, not the fastest guy back there. So, like you said, Cooper, an 88 is a pretty dang good grade for a QB. And there's going to be some movement. I think a lot of the quarterback movement will take place after the Elite 11 finals, which will be in June. So
we got some time. I love those questions. It's like, why are you the way that you are? That was a good answer, Drew. Very, very good there. Tom, Anquan Fegans, any updates there in terms of recruitment?
I know Clemson, Georgia, a couple others are involved, but if I had a best guess right now, I think Auburn would be the one to get it done. I know we talked about them. It's probably going to have you all perked up, but the Tigers seem to be doing a really good job there, and they're probably the one to watch right now.
Drew, maybe you have some context on this, maybe not. Thoughts on Luca Gilbert?
He's an interesting one. I think I'm kind of his sole fan at 24/7 Sports in terms of like, all right, the scouting team, everyone's watched him. You hear a lot of, okay, like what is he long term? He's 6'6", and he's a bit kind of a clunky mover, but I think when you put on the tape of Luca Gilbert, what stands out is like, oh, he is a willing blocker. All right. I love what you see on the basketball court from him, spatial awareness. We'll see how this tight end board shakes out, what guys emerge. We just touched on it, late blooming position, but I think there are tools to mold for the long haul there with Luca Gilbert. You can't teach the size. He has it. I think his ability to block certainly stands out. I hope we're talking about the tight end, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, just do you see a tackle with him potentially down the road?
I mean, I would have to dig in on the back end, and I've never seen him in person, so I don't know how light he is.
All right, guys, a couple more questions here, and then we'll get Tom and Drew out of here. Drew, this one for you and probably for me as well. Thoughts on Solomon Thomas?
Oof. IOL, right? At Jacksonville Reigns. I think what stands out about Solomon Thomas is went to Mainland Reigns back in the early season. So that would have been September or whatnot. I thought he kind of held his own at times against LJ McCray, right? In that Mainland front, they had Zay Mincy at the corner position, LJ McCray. They got this kid, Christian Hudson, who's a spark plug of a defensive tackle. Solomon, to me, he took his lumps in the first quarter, a couple false starts, but he really kind of adjusted and competed against LJ, who was a 5-star, one of our top ranked players in the last cycle. I think, for Florida State, this is the offensive line signee that I get the most excited about, that they've kind of brought in that Mike Norvell era. I got a higher grade on him than I do with Lucas Simmons. We list him as an interior guy. I think he could play potentially right tackle if you needed him to. But you think about Alex Atkins getting his hands on him. He's one of the guys I feel the best about in the Sunshine State right now. And what's also notable about that junior season, played all of it with a broken bone in his hand. Finally got the cast off. Coop, I don't remember, if you remember him at the Future 50. He had the club on his arm, so he's a competitor. He's got some power to him, and technically, I think he's kind of advanced for his age.
Number one interior offensive lineman in the country for a reason. And I'll tell you why. All right, this was about a month ago. 6'3", 3/4, 313 pounds, thick trunk, explosive lower body. Then you think about the length, the hand size as well. 10-inch hands, 36.5-inch arms. He's got elite length, almost a 7-foot wingspan as well. He's at 83 1/4 there. So you think about that from a physical trait standpoint. He's got all the clay. Now, I think the biggest thing is what I like about Solomon Thomas is he's kind of cross-training at left tackle right now. Ultimately, at the end of the day, he's going to slide inside at the next level. He's going to play guard, and I think he's really good on contact. His ability to anchor, his ability to move people off the line of scrimmage. He plays with a lot of power. And then once you kind of condense that space, I think that's really where he excels. So I love Solomon Thomas. He's got a little bit of stiffness, but I like the fact he's playing tackle right now. And I think what you want in any interior offensive lineman at the next level is you want them to have the ability to certainly be able to play tackle at the high school level. And then certainly I think Solomon Thomas, if you got in a pinch, can also play right tackle at the next level, right? So there is some position flex there. I like Solomon Thomas a lot. Love that question, by the way. All right, a couple more. Drew, I'm going to pull up the schedule here, but just off the dome. Miami, 10-win team this year?
There's like college football playoff futures out there. Like, all right, will they make the 12 team? I kind of scrolled up and down. Like, Miami's the one to me where I'm like, I can talk myself into this. I think it's an easier schedule. When you look at it, obviously you got to take down Florida, but Cam Ward, you want a Heisman lottery ticket, and Coop, I know you're on board with him. Tom, I don't know if you have thoughts on Cam Ward. I think he could be a rocket man in terms of, name, after September in terms of a playmaker. So I think it's certainly obtainable. And I think what also stands out about Miami, they return Shannon Dawson, and they return the defensive coordinator, drawing a blank on the name there. There's some continuity in Coral Gables for the first time in a while when it comes to that coordinator position.
I think Cam's as good as everybody thinks. Like, it's pretty cut and dry. If he's the real deal, then he's going to take them places that they haven't been in a little while. But that's where it all kind of rides on him. So they're going to go as far as he could take them.
Yeah, I think chance to win 10 games if it's either in the ACC championship or whether it's in the postseason as well. So I love Cam Ward. Like, Cam Ward is a needle mover, right? We talk about those guys that are kind of like the key to the ignition. That is Cam Ward in my mind. I think he drips of day one NFL draft potential. I think this is going to be the guy that now is going to have the microscope under him going from Washington State to Miami. Miami certainly having a pathway there. The follow-up question to this from Steve, and I think this is a great follow-up question. What would it take for you to believe in Miami as a perennial power again? Win football games, right?
I was going to say a 10-win season.
Right. We just talked about a clear path to 10 wins, and quite honestly, if they exceed expectations, I mean, you're talking about a potential opportunity to play in a college football playoff, right? You think about Miami and the momentum that Mario has been able to build off the field, not only from a resource standpoint, and then investing in facilities, investing in NIL, investing in that roster. It's all there. Andrew just brought it up. I think for a winning program, you have to have a culture in place. And year 3 is a big year for any head coach that's early on in their tenure. Andrew just talked about the continuity. Here's the thing. I think Mario made a mistake his first year with the 2 hires. Obviously, it's easier to say that now, Monday morning quarterback with the 2 coordinator spots, Kevin Steele and Josh Gaddis. Disaster. The next year, he goes out there and he makes 2 hires that I wouldn't call like media savvy hires, right? There was nobody out there saying, oh, okay, Shannon Dawson and Lance Guidry. I mean, to the average fan, that doesn't blow your socks off. But those guys were a lot better last year, and they played faster too. And Drew talked about it. I think going from year 1 to year 2 with that level of continuity across the board is a huge deal. And now you plug in that guy in the middle at the quarterback position. I think Miami's got a chance to maybe surprise some people at a really high level. I think the other thing is I think Miami's going to be like a year-to-year type of school when it comes to the quarterback position. You know, the similar way we've seen Oregon kind of handle it, right? Yeah, sure, they brought in Novosad and they had some guys that Luke Moga from high school, but if they go out and they get Dylan Gabriel, they go out and they get Dante Moore, then they're going to get it done. Because really, at the end of the day, the rest of the roster is, well, we feel like we can compete for a college football playoff appearance, then why wouldn't you go invest in that quarterback position? So I think Cam Ward is tip of the iceberg right now for what they're going to be down the line.
I mean, people won't agree with this, but they also have like more quarterback depth than a lot of teams in the country. We need to get into the next gen logic and look this up. They got Reese Poffenberg, who started games at Albany. Ja'Cory Brown comes back, who started games at Miami and won games, and Emory Williams on top of Cam Ward. Like, how many starts is that at quarterback? Which I think is important as the season progresses.
Well, let me look that up. And as I look that up, Tom, let me ask you, what's the feel on Miami right now on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, I was just glancing at so their top target board over at Inside the U or 24/7 Sports Miami site. And man, this class, if they can land some of these guys, like top 247 guys, they could shake things up, man. Because we already talked about DJ Pickett, and they're in the top 3 for him. And you got Jamie French, they're probably in the top 3 for him with Ohio State and Florida State. You got JJ Olufatuli out of Bishop Gorman, got a very good shot there. I think my crystal ball is actually on Miami. Dallas Wilson, I could see them absolutely flipping him from Oregon. But I mean, I can go on. Ben Hanks, Gavin Nix, all these guys, Dallas Golden, they could land. I mean, we're not even outside the top 100 at this point. I think they got as good a shot as any to add Brock Schott, top 247 4-star tight end. I mean, if you land all these guys, and they may not land all of them, but if you land half of them, I think this class kind of really sets the tone for the future of Miami. And I know we didn't really talk quarterback, but I think they have a good one in Luke Nickel, a game manager. People take that as disrespect, but it's a guy who can win a lot of games for Miami. So I think this class can do a great job of setting the bar.
Drew, 75 active starts returning to the Canes in the quarterback room.
I thought it might be a little bit more, but that's still impressive.
Okay, last question here from our guy who's just been mixing it up in the chat for the last hour and 12 minutes. Michael, Dallas fan, I won't read the rest of it. He says, what does Notre Dame and Coach Freeman look like when they win a college football playoff game in 2024 before Brian Kelly does in his entire career? Seems a little bit personal. Let's just talk about Notre Dame. Let's focus on the good in this situation. I was very skeptical of Marcus Freeman after year 1, and I liked the way that they recruited. I remember that, I kind of got some buzz about saying that I didn't think it was too different than Brian Kelly. Now, I thought the effort was, right? We can talk about the intentionality. I thought there was a lot more urgency, but the final result, was different. What I mean by that is the intention was good. So back to the Penn State conversation, right? Like, they were in it for Dante Moore. They were in it for Keon Keeley. They were in it for Peyton Bowen. Like, that takes what it takes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, they didn't have enough to get it done. But I love the way that Notre Dame has really picked it up on the recruiting trail. And, you hear it all the time, 1% better, right? 1% better, whether it's coaches, whether it's leaders. They always talk about, all right, how do we get incrementally better? The best thing about Marcus Freeman to me so far on the recruiting trail, and especially coaching as well, and some of the hires that he's made, he's gotten better. He's continued to evolve. And I think now that there is a little bit more of, I would say, sample size on Marcus Freeman, not only as a coach, but as a recruiter and as a leader, I think recruits are more willing to kind of buy into Marcus Freeman as well. So I love the job that Marcus Freeman's doing. He's got a great staff there as well, especially off the field. I don't know. I'm pretty fascinated with this 12-team playoff because, I mean, we talk about how slim the margin is from like good to great. And I think that's kind of where Notre Dame is in the conversation right now. I think they're good, right? But what do you need to do to go from great? And I will also tell you this. I think the best thing about this 12-team playoff is it's going to show a lot of programs who think they believe that they should be in the mix with some of the best programs in the country. Well, you get in that 12-team playoff, you're going to get exactly what you asked for. And that's going to be the barometer to show you how close you actually are. So I think, yeah, I don't think we're far away. I think it's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 years here with Notre Dame crashing the CFP.
I think they have a great shot. I think they're going to be in the top 12 this year. I liked what they brought in with Riley Leonard, RJ Oben. I absolutely love Chris Mitchell as a wide receiver. And I think people are sleeping on, at least from people I've talked to at Notre Dame, Jaden Harrison, who came over from Marshall. They're adding speed that they haven't had for a long time. And that's going to give Riley a lot of opportunities. And they obviously have some really good backs and offensive line. There's a lot to like with that team. Now, can they get over that hump and win a national championship? Who knows? But I think this is a team that's going to go pretty far this year. And then moving forward, you guys know I really liked what they brought in 24. And I think they have they have a great class right now, but I think it can be much better if they add some of the top guys that they're pushing for. So long way to go, though. But I think this year's team has a chance to go pretty far.
Michael, your love for Notre Dame is unmatched, I will say. Anybody who's in the chat right now on a Wednesday at 12 o'clock firing off a bunch of emojis in all caps deserves a little bit of love. All right, boys, final thoughts here as we cap off an almost 1 hour, 20-minute show.
I got a thought for you. I was having this conversation at the Arnold Palmer, talking to a UCF fan, right? He's like, I saw Dylan Gabriel play when he was at UCF. UCF last season, he saw him play when the Knights went out to Oklahoma. So he saw Dylan Gabriel play at Oklahoma. And then he was telling me his buddy is a big Michigan fan, so he's going to go to Michigan, Oregon. I'm like, so you've seen Dylan Gabriel play in 3 different stadiums in 3 different uniforms. Are we going to get to a point where this is like, because they do this in like hockey, right? If a guy comes back to a stadium, they like do like a tribute. Are we that far off in college football?
Dude. The Pelicans gave a tribute video to like Garrett Temple the other night.
Yeah.
Who I get it, he's from like Louisiana, but that guy barely played. Like, what are we doing? I think that's where we are as a society. Hell no, I'm not giving Dylan Gabriel a freaking tribute video. You kidding me?
It got my mind thinking with all this player movement. I'm like, what?
Oh, shut up, man. Go to the next school. You're not getting a tribute video. No, sorry if that fires me up a little bit. I like that one though. Tom, what do you got? Any final thoughts?
I got nothing, man. This was a great show. Enjoyed, dealing with you guys. I was going to actually end it with a David Sanders crystal ball, but we're not there yet, man. We're not going to jump the gun there. But
what if we get a commitment tonight from David Sanders?
Like, and I'm going to be very upset. We can maybe throw some editing in, but no, I think it could happen, man. I feel great about the Tigers, but
so from a fan side or just me being curious, what's holding you back from doing it?
I don't like being wrong, and I want to make sure that this isn't almost too obvious. It was kind of like, it's just like that pick that like it's just too clear, and then it actually happens, and you're like, well, I saw the writing on the wall. Why didn't I pull the trigger? But he's been there double-digit times. I think Clemson's setting the bar, but in this NIL era, in this space of just anything can change overnight, man. Especially when you're talking about the best offensive lineman in the country that's rightfully going to get a bag.
That's just acceptable to say now. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it might be hammering out the details as we speak. Yeah.
Like I just think that a lot can change, man. So I'd hate to be wrong, and I don't get the Clemson fans too fired up, but yeah, they're in a great spot, man. They're really in a good spot.
He'd be 5th highest ranked commit of all time for the Tigers, behind T-Law, Daquan Bowers, Brian Bresee, and Dexter Lawrence.
Maybe
what is
David?
What is the reaction from the college football national media that seems to think the Tigers are on their decline if he pulls that off?
I think people are just melting down because they don't do anything in the transfer portal, but they're recruiting at a high level. They're landing a lot of good pieces. I still like them for Josh Petty right now. Man, for a school not recruiting all that well, they seem to be doing a pretty good job.
I am that guy that's melting down because they don't use the transfer portal.
I didn't say it wasn't right or wrong. I agree.
Imagine if somebody said to you, "Hey, you can only build a roster through the NFL draft. Can't use free agency."
Oof. Be a lot of guys out of a job.
Right. Well, that's kind of my point. And to Drew's point is that's kind of the frustrating thing. Nobody is perfect when building a roster. It puts an immense amount of pressure on everybody in that building to only tap in to high school recruiting. And the other thing about this, I can continuously say this. The same thing that Dabo is protecting with his culture, which I completely understand because he has built a pristine culture there and a culture that people buy in, they're all in, and that he wants to protect. If he does it the right way, which that's the question, right? Via the transfer portal, what does that look like? To me, that could be his biggest asset. I think Clemson is a destination spot in college football. And the sooner that I think maybe he comes to grips with that, what is now viewed as a negative could be an overwhelming positive for Clemson. All he's got to do is turn on the faucet, So it's not that easy. It's not that easy to say, well, yeah, we want the right people in here. Do the work, right? That's why you got all those people on staff, right? You're paying them a lot of money. So, yeah, interesting to see. Guys, a lot of zigging and zagging today. We thank Tom for coming on the show. We'll do that weekly whenever we can. Tom coming on, obviously, to give the football recruiting insight. Guy's been a busy man. Same with Andrew, working their tail off here at 24/7 Sports along with the rest of our team. Guys, like I said, every Tuesday, Wednesday, you can find us on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. You can also find us on X. Guys, make sure to like and subscribe. Like I said, tomorrow, 24/7 Sports Live. We've got a great show for you, me, Carl Reed, Smoke Dixon as well. For Andrew Ivins, Tom Loy, I'm Cooper Petagna. We'll see you next week.